there was a clip of Seth where he was like, I don't know if we're going to go to events this year.
I mean, it's kind of boring talking about Atlanta. I'm not going to lie to you.
If you're a great player on a team, you're going to be a player.
Welcome back, guys. This is episode 2 of Reverse Sweep. I'm here with my co-hosts, Pat Price, Chris Duarte. Before we get into this week's matches, I think it's important we talk about the Scump and the CDL DMCA controversy. It's obviously been a big topic of conversation within the community, so I think it's important we start with that before we go into the matches. What's your guys' thoughts overall in that whole thing? I know you guys are obviously closely involved with it with the flank, so I think it's important to hear you guys' opinions on it.
Yeah, I'll start. I guess first and foremost, it was surprising to see Scump actually get his channel copyright striked. We kind of knew that Activision had been threatening that with this strong arm situation with YouTube. But I mean, in all my years, Seth has never really been on that side of getting, let's say, punished by Activision. So it was a first for me, which is always surprising. The big thing is now I think I see that these creators who are doing these big watch parties are gonna be exclusive to YouTube, right? They all said basically we're not gonna stream on Twitch during the games. And looks like the Activision strong arm worked, sadly. There is ramifications that could come of this. I think, there's a clip of Seth, I don't know if you guys saw it, where he was like, I don't know if we're going to go to events this year now because of this. And this was obviously the same conversation with the flank because, getting all these people out to events are expensive and you're losing a lot of downtime on Twitch, where obviously that's where these guys make, the most of their money from ad revenue and subs. And so missing out on 5-6 days of streaming on Twitch is a big ordeal for them. And so it's going to be interesting to see what kind of unfolds from that. It still sucks, right? We talked about this last episode. I think everyone should be able to, especially watch parties, shouldn't be restricted like this. Especially when you consider, looking years back, Activision pays other creators to come and do watch parties. They paid Courage, they paid Nick Merckx, TP, all these guys to do watch parties. And, your two biggest COD creators are doing it for free and we're restricting them to these nuanced rules. So it sucks. And again, I'm just surprised that he actually got a copyright strike.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you, Pat. I mean, we've talked about this quite extensively. However, just from the internal conversations that we've had with the flank and just to my understanding, Activision was very transparent into what they were going to do. Basically, if you went and streamed on Twitch during the games while doing a watch party, even if you weren't showing gameplay, if you were basically saying you were watching the gameplay or it was pretty obvious you were watching the gameplay, that they would threaten your rights to stream the watch party on YouTube. Because at the end of the day, they technically own the content that you guys are, or that these players or these content creators are watch partying. So they can technically do whatever they want with it in terms of allowing people to make react content or whatever the hell people are doing, right? So they kind of knew it was coming, but they just tested their gangster, as some people would say, and Activision followed through, which was again, it was quite surprising. Like I said, I pretty much agree with you, Pat. Though it's dumb that we even have to go through this as an esport.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? I mean, I think that if you you can look at both sides of the story. I think that I kind of understand the perspective of the COD League and Activision, but at the same time, I think that, like we touched on last week, I think that we need to do whatever it can to grow the esport, and I think that we're kind of going backwards there. So that's the biggest concern. But again, I think that it's one of those things. You can kind of understand their perspective in terms of wanting to have everything on YouTube. But it's tough at the end of the day. I think that we want to keep our big content creators happy. Not having the OpTic guys, even though they're probably still going to be doing their watch parties, from home and stuff like that, I'd assume. Not having them at the events is definitely going to take away fans that are going to attend those events to meet those guys potentially. So I think at the end of the day, if that is the route that the OpTic guys go down, it's definitely going to be a big loss for us at the events, for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think that going into this week's matches, I think that we had a bunch of crazy things going on, and I think we want to start off really with my biggest hot pick from last week, which was the Miami Heretics. I think that I bought the ticket. I was really fully convinced that they were going to come in this week and get a 2-0 start, and they did just that. I know they had kind of easier matches when it comes into it, but I'm really, really happy with how they performed. I think that, you look at the matches coming up, it might be more difficult for them to win every single match, but really hot start. Metals, especially this weekend, I think had an incredible match. So in both series, I think he had like 20k damage in the first one and then like 14k in the next. Although against quote unquote weaker opposition in Minnesota and Vegas, but still very impressive nonetheless for a team that were kind of coming in as like the 12th place team in the CDL.
Miami are doing a really good job of cementing themselves as at least the top of the mid pack for now. They've been just beating everyone that we'd expect them to beat if they were of that caliber, and that's really all you can really hope for them. I'm just glad that the Spanish, and their fan base are starting the season well, because obviously wanting to keep that sort of fan base invested, you want them to have a good, strong start and just look well throughout the season. But yeah, super impressed with the roster. Journey, he put up the hard point kill record. So he obviously had a pop-off match, but yeah, they're looking really good right now. I think as we're getting to this break, we're starting to kind of see where the top of the mid pack is, while the bottom of the teams is it's anyone's game right now.
They're at the top of the standings right now, which I don't think anybody would have had coming into the beginning of this year. And for me, they're like you mentioned, Mark, they've remained clutch in every game mode. They're winning searches, they're clutching up in controls, and they're looking solid in hardpoint. Obviously they haven't went up against the top 4 teams yet, but I think they've solidified themselves as a top 5 team in that, top 5 pack. And so for me, I'm really excited to see what's going to happen when they play those better teams. But I mean, they've done their job so far. They've beat everybody that's came in front of them in the schedule. And, they've turned some heads. So, I mean, I think it's all high hopes and good vibes in the Heretics camp. And I guess we'll just have to see if they can continue this at the start of the new year.
Yeah, exactly. It's just going to come down to how they perform against those top teams. I can see them being that sort of team that comes in throughout the season and takes upset victories. I don't want to sit here right now and say they're going to be a top 3 team for sure. I think that's going to be a difficult ask with all the top quality squads out there. So I definitely can see them being that sort of upset potential squad that might sneak into those top 3, top 4 placements at events. But talking of one of those top teams, I think Atlanta are another squad here that's this week just took care of business. They come against Seattle, who come in off a fresh 2-0 start. Obviously, they lost to OpTic, but then they come up against Seattle in the second match, and you've seen obviously a big victory there. You sometimes see those redemption matches from like the likes of Arcitys when you're coming up against his old squad, but we didn't really get that. I think that we saw just Atlanta taking care of business. I don't think they've really been the Atlanta of old where we see them just completely dominating teams in every single series, but at the end of the day, they're coming in and they're getting victories. And they're also one of those teams that joins Miami towards the top of the standings with a 3-0 record. So I think that they're one of those teams that are just going to consistently get results as we expect from Atlanta Faze throughout the season. But I mean, it's kind of boring talking about Atlanta. I'm not going to lie to you. It's just, you kind of come in every season and just expect them to be around the top. So they've just took care of business this week, and yeah.
Would you guys say they're the best Atlanta Faze we've ever seen?
No.
You don't think so?
Not from a dominance perspective.
No. From a pure talent roster, from a pure roster like talent standpoint, do you think this is the best Atlanta Faze we've ever seen?
Yeah, you could argue that for sure.
Dude, I think it is. I was looking at like a few of their stat lines, and I forget which series it was, but they all had like the same amount of kills. Like it was like so evenly distributed of the amount of kills that they're putting in for each player. And yeah, I mean, like the craziest thing is we probably are, at least in this game, right? We're getting like prime Simp back, and then you have Draza, who's like, the thing about Draza is he's not coming in to play a role like Arcitys did or like Slasher did. Like he has legit takeover games. That Karachi control game comes to mind. It was like 27 and then like 11 or whatever it was. Yeah. Like talent wise, I think they have the best Atlanta Faze squad they've ever had. And yeah, I mean, Mark, like it's boring talking about them, but like even watching them, it's kind of boring because they just take care of business. Like I'm excited to see. I know we talked about this a lot, where there's 4 teams and there's everybody else, but like it's gonna be really fun when we start seeing these 4 teams match up against each other, because I think there's gonna be some slugfest, especially with
superstars on every
Toronto.
single team. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm on the same page as you guys. I mean, what more can you say about Atlanta Faze? They come in, they take care of business. I think the top 4 are pretty much a step above the rest. Outside of Toronto, a little faltered this week. But Atlanta Faze, super talented stack of players. Simp returning to form makes this even scarier because Draza, Cell, and aBeZy have all looked good in their own right in the past couple games. And Simp, although still a championship caliber player, no denying that, he wasn't the Simp of old and back at like how he was in Cold War. But now he stepped it up to an entirely new caliber. They did play the Seattle Surge, so I'm still gonna, hold my thoughts when it really comes down to these top 4 teams to see how they stack up against each other. But Seattle, by no means, was a team that was looking bad, coming into today. They've looked exceptional, and they still took care of business like it was nothing.
Yeah, 100%. I think that Cold War phase is probably the one that you're kind of their top benchmark, because just how dominant they were. They were winning series consistently 3-0. Obviously, the amount of events they won as well. So I think it's one of those ones. It's going to be hard for them to overcome that. But I think I agree with you guys in terms of on paper the talent. It just depends if it meshes as well, or if it's even possible to get to that standard. I think the league was obviously a completely different state at that point as well, where I feel like you had a lot more weaker teams at that stage. So yeah, it's going to be hard to compare. It's always hard comparing different years and different generations of teams, but FaZe are obviously just looking as good as they usually are. OpTic, on the other hand, they came out after I was giving them a lot of hate last week, criticising their S&D. That was the main concern of mine, because looking at their team, they're obviously going to be a great respawn team. But I think S&D was a bit of a concern of mine. I think they've spoke about it on stream. You've seen some clips out there, and they've really been drilling into the practice on that, and really came in this week, and then they got the dubs there, and that was able to be the catalyst for them to finish off 2-0, which is kind of what we expect from OpTic coming into this week. If you had the matchups beforehand, before the season had started, you'd definitely expect them to be finishing a 2-0 here. So very, very surprised by the quick turnaround, to be fair, and how much their S&D improved. But I think if they consistently win S&Ds, they're going to be a tough team to beat, because at the end of the day, they're a very strong respawn team on paper, and they're going to be throughout the year. So yeah, really, really happy with their turnaround this week.
I will say though, I'll give them credit for the Seattle game. The Ravens one, it's hard for me to give them credit for, because that was like a pub match. Like, there was such a skill diff in that series that they could have played at their worst, I feel like, and still easily beat the Ravens. That one looked really bad. Like, I don't know if you saw, but like everyone on the Ravens was literally like a 0.5 KD except for Gwen, and then there was OpTic setting CDL records against them. So OpTic looked good. The Seattle series was a good watch. And it kind of answered some questions for me with like how Seattle was going to match up against these top teams. Obviously, we saw them against Atlanta, we saw them against OpTic, and OpTic handled business, and obviously both Respawn, but the Search as well. And so I think if you're an OpTic fan, like you're definitely happy that they bounced back in S&D and they aren't looking as sloppy as they did in the first weekend. And for me, it obviously answered questions about the Surge and where they kind of stand against teams like OpTic, teams like FaZe. And so definitely good to see. Kenny, especially, again, has continued to impress me. Pred stepped it up big this weekend as well. So good to see for the Green Wall.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you, Pat. My thing is, in terms of their S&D turnaround, I know Dashy and Shotzzy have been playing some S&D money eights pretty much every night for the last couple of nights, as the pros have not been running Respawn. So I think that's obviously benefited them on an individual level. I think Dashy set like a KD record in Search and Destroy in their last match. They all set records, to be fair. But I mean, they've all stepped it up. Dashy had a great series today, which we were kind of wondering where he's been, because he's been a little quiet, collecting a lot of hill time for their team. Their hard points look dangerous, but he stepped it up today. And in general, like I said, I was saying on the flank, dude, LePred is here, bro. It was a matter of time before he started to turn up. They're playing a lot of sub-favored maps on Skid Row, and I think Karachi are like the main maps they've been playing a lot, and dude, he's been taking over. He's looking really good. So, I'm excited to watch these top teams go at it, because, like you said, it's going to be a bloodbath out there.
How have we not had a top team matchup in the first weekend? Like, what was the CDL doing when they were planning this?
We've only had OpTic in New York, and that one was a fun one. It was a battle. Absolute choke out of OpTic, I think, in their first series. New York almost getting reverse swept, but I mean, that was a fun series. So if that's going to be a benchmark for where these series are going to go, I'm excited to see them play.
Yeah, we've seen some crazy results over the first 2 weekends as well. Like we just touched on there, we had Seattle that started off 2-0, then they come in this week, they're 0-2, and I think that you're obviously seeing ups and downs from different teams. looking at this weekend, you have Thieves and Boston being massive examples of this. You have Thieves starting off winning 3-0 the first match of the weekend. Then they come in, then they're getting 3-0'd in their next match. Same thing for Boston. They get 3-0'd, then they come in against Ultra and 3-0. It's been very up and down for both those teams, which is really strange, to be honest. I don't really often see that happen, where it's a complete flip from this 2 days difference in matches. So it's really interesting to see that, to be honest, and I'm interested to know what you guys think on Thieves. I think obviously they've started off pretty poorly, 1-3. Coming in, they were not really a team that I guess were touted as a top 4 squad, but I think they were definitely a team that you'd have around the top 6, top 8 mark, and they've started off fairly poorly. But I'm interested to know what your guys' thoughts are on Thieves specifically.
Go ahead, Pat.
For me, it kind of just speaks to the inconsistency of all the teams in the bottom half of the league right now. Like, I know maps and vetoes play a part in matchups as well, but like I feel like we're getting just different version of these teams day to day. Boston's a great example, right? Like their series versus Toronto was night and day that we had seen so far, and I think it's the same thing with the Thieves. I honestly, I'm not really high on this roster to begin with. Like, don't let me pretend like I think this Thieves team has a high ceiling. I think they're destined for middle of the pack, and I think they should be, knowing Nadeshot, knowing this camp of wanting to win. Like, obviously they had some cost savings here to get this roster together, but like, they should, in my opinion, should be jumping at the first roster change. This roster change should have Thieves written all over it. And they're not good at anything, right? Like, am I crazy? They're just like a master of none team. Like, they're not a particularly good hardpoint, S&D, control. They're just kind of all over the board for me, and even their players are pretty inconsistent. Like, I think today, not to call Cammy out, but like, he had a horrible Sunday compared to like how he played the other day. So I don't know. I don't even know what to think with these guys. I just think they're just super inconsistent as a whole.
I mean, I don't think that's going to change much. I'm going to be honest, just looking at the players they have on their team. However, what I will say is that these teams, this middle of the pack, because I think that's kind of where the discussion is going now with like the whole like Thieves and the Bostons, is like a lot of people thought that Thieves was going to be that dark horse team, right? A lot of people in the coaches poll and all that stuff were saying that Thieves is probably going to be around that 5 to 6 mark, but they've shown me that they haven't showed me that they are capable of even reaching that mark yet. They've just, like you said, they have not looked good at particularly anything. Nobody on their team is like a crazy standout player. I think Afro's shown some bits of like shooting back and like having a couple pop-off maps. But outside of that, like, I couldn't tell you something specifically that Thieves are good at. But when I look at teams like Seattle, when I look at teams like Miami, and even LAG, which we'll talk about a little bit here, is also a sleeper team. I can point out things and maps and game modes that I'm like, okay, I'm confident that they will be competitive or potentially lock in some of these maps. But Thieves, I don't know what they're doing.
Even their comms. Did you guys hear their listen-ins?
Yeah.
Like, they were just flustered. They didn't seem like they had an agenda to follow. Yeah, like, I heard multiple times, I think it was Dango's like, chill out, guys. Like I feel like they're just, I think they're getting frustrated as well because I think they feel the way we think about them, right? They're just not exceptional at anything. And to your point, Chris, like, another thing is they don't really have like maps that they can say they're the best at. Like, even, in the past, our bottom teams have had their good maps. Like LAG was a good example. Before today, it was like, don't play those guys on high-rise S&D ever, right? Like, it's their clear-cut best map. I don't feel like teams are afraid of playing Thieves on any map. Like, they don't have anything that's just like, avoid them on that. So yeah, I think they have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, their comms were really concerning. I think that obviously it is the worst possible time to go into listening. Don't get me wrong; they're coming in,
Yeah.
they're down 2-0, they're getting destroyed. They've just been 1v2'd by DiamondCon on the first round. Like, it's a very weird situation to go into listening for and expect to hear like great comms, but. Yeah, it seems like there's a real lack of like leadership and direction there. Obviously, I think Dan is supposed to be that guy. Obviously, I've worked with Cammy and Joe previously. I don't necessarily believe that they're leadership type figures. So for me, I think it's a big concern there is just that team composition. Who's really going to step up in those tough moments when it comes down to being 2-0 down against a team that you're probably coming in expecting to destroy? They came off a 3-0 win at the weekend. They're then coming in to play LAG. Famously, a matchup, funnily enough, that LAG dominate. But yeah, they're probably coming into that match thinking they're going to smoke LAG. then they come out on the other end of an absolute beating in the final map. So
What do you guys think
tough.
Shane and Cap are thinking, or even telling them? Like, what do you think that vibe in that camp is right now?
Well, you've seen it on one of their reaction videos, actually. I think this is an important thing to notice, actually. After they won their first match 3-0, they posted a clip onto social media where they were saying, this is what happens when we don't complain in practice. So clearly there's some breakdowns going on there within practice. They're clearly moaning about the game, maybe little things here that are frustrating them when it comes down to the spawn systems or whatever that may be. But I know myself, when you're a coach, when you're Shane and Cap doing that job, it's hard when you have players who are really just showing a lot of distaste for the game. So I think that if they focus in on that and make sure they're really ramping up their quality of practice, I think they'll definitely get better, because I do believe they have the talent to be a good team. I think the leadership is probably my biggest concern outside of that. But yeah, I
Do you think the spawn update or just the update in general helps them at all?
I think so. I think if you look at the way the sort of maps change, they slightly slow down, especially in hardpoint. But at the end of the day, like you said, they don't look strong on anything. So it doesn't really change control RS&D.
Yeah.
I think they just need to kind of really go back to the drawing board and try and improve in all areas.
I feel like the game is going to slow down a lot with the new patch, because if you played it, the spawns got pushed out a lot more. Even maps like Subbase, which were bang out maps, are slowing down a lot more. So in terms of like some of the teams that might get hectic and not know how to thrive in that sort of environment, it might actually potentially help them, get their comms back on point and be less frantic on the map. But not really going to buy too much into that. But I also think, like, in general, they do have talent, Mark, but I feel like I've said this on the flank. This game takes the least amount of talent to be successful. The guns are easy as fuck to shoot.
Yeah.
The way the map's currently played, at least in the last patch, barring a couple, are super structured, and it's very easy to punish teams that are not like rotating or like doing things that are maybe not conventional. So you're seeing some teams maybe get away with that, with not having the talent stack that some of these other rosters have for now. And I think that if they want to improve, they're going to have to iron down on their discipline and actually kind of have game plans and teamwork. Because right now it just seems like they're 4 players that are kind of just running around the map, just trying to like essentially just shit on other players. And they're not, it doesn't look like they have game plan or strategy, even in their comms. Like, you don't really hear them like talk about what they want to do on the map, more so just like, oh, here's a player, here's a player, here's a player. Okay, so like, what are you guys going to do? You know?
Yeah. Subbase as well, being the first map today, I think it's an interesting one. Like we've touched on, it changes a lot in this next patch, but in the current state of the game that we've watched for the previous 2 weeks, it is a hectic map. It's crazy, and the worst team can sometimes come away with a victory there if they're just popping off on like P4 Hill. So I think that, to be honest, it was a weird decision in my eyes with them playing that map against a team like LAG. I think if you're wanting to, I mean, obviously we don't know how they're doing in practice. Maybe that is a strong map for them. They have good SMG players in theory, so it's hard to say, but I think it's weird when you're playing against a team that you probably are much better than on paper, to be playing a bit of a map that's kind of chaotic and pretty much decided by like 1 or 2 Ls, because P2, P3 is pretty much just like contest heavy, everyone's trading out kills. You can get good time on it, but most of the time it's just going to be decided by those P4 hills where you're going to get the majority of the time. So it's an interesting choice.
Are they also all 4 in LA? Are they the only team that's 4 in LA?
They must be, yeah.
Yeah, they are. LAG is all in like Texas.
Yeah.
And I think, Astral's the only person that is not. I think he's just at home. I think he's in like North Carolina or something.
So that could play a role though, right? For the Thieves struggling. Like, obviously they're bad, but like, bad plus at a disadvantage online is always like a super dagger. So I wonder if that could at least, maybe we look for them to be a little bit better on land. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. We might just be coping a little bit. But moving forward from the LAT camp, another team we touched on being a little inconsistent is Boston. We were fucking grueling them yesterday on the flank.
As we should have, because they were looking terrible. They did, again, they're a team that just didn't have any signs of being good at anything. And then all of a sudden today, they catch Toronto asleep. Actually, no, they caught Envoy asleep. That boy didn't even show up. And they looked insane. Like, if today, like, imagine if like
this was if this was a consistent performance for Boston, like you would say this team is insane because like everyone was firing on all cylinders. Snoopy, insane. Cap played really well. Priesta had a really pop off map, and Slasher had some clutch moments. Like, I mean, I don't think they're going to be able to reproduce this, but I mean, it's still good signs going into the break. You don't want to start off with a goose egg essentially in the stage. So, I mean, what do you guys think about the Boston Breach?
I think the biggest swing from the first game of the weekend to the second was Priesta's performance. Obviously, we've seen pop-off moments from Snoopy. Priesta dropped like a 0.7 in the first match and then a 1.23 in the next. So, like, he's had a drastic improvement in his performance. So I think for him, that's probably the biggest change for their team, in my opinion, is I think he's a real X factor for them. I think you need him to perform at like a decent level for them to be consistent. You know what you're going to be getting from Slasher for the most part. So I think if he's able to be playing at a more consistent level, I think they're able to actually sort of string together wins. Snoopy is going to continue to get better, in my opinion, throughout the year. The more he gets comfortable with communicating in English, and I know he's been playing with like English players for quite a while, but it's still a bit of a change. I think that he's going to consistently get better and better, and we've seen his individual talent there. There's been clips throughout off season coming into the stage, so I think that he's definitely going to be one to look out for.
In regards to Priesta, hasn't that kind of always been the story of Priesta? Yeah. How he's always like just super up and down. Like sometimes he's having these insane series, and other times he just looks really poor. I feel like
I think that's why he got dropped on MISL.
that might make sense. But in terms of the X factor, I quite literally think he is. And it's because Snoopy and Cap, they play wildly aggressive, right? And when you're looking for that backbone, you already know Austin is going to be playing that super disciplined play style. Not saying he can't get in the mix when he needs to, but I mean, you don't really look at him to be that type of player. For me, Priesta is like that Draza player, right? Where he's just going in, like he's squaring up, he's taking that aggressive approach, and he needs to be in there supporting his SMGs a lot. And I feel like it's a very give and take type of relationship with like Snoopy and Cap and Priesta, where I feel like if Snoopy and Cap are both going to play well, then Priesta is going to thrive from that sort of environment.
But like, do you guys think that, like, for me personally, I hate X Factor players. Like, I know they exist, but I'm like, especially with where we look at the talent of these top teams, like, I feel like you can't afford to have an X Factor player who could be Super Saiyan in one day and the worst player in the entire league the next. Like, I feel like you need a moderate level of consistency, whether you have pop-off ability or not. Like, you need to have a floor that isn't the bottom. And I think the problem with me is, like, you know, some of these X Factor players that we've seen in the past, like, yeah, their ceiling super high, but they could be literally the absolute coster in a match. Like, Mark, I know you love Hixie, but like Hixie on Toronto was a good example of this. Like sometimes he would be like just really bad, and it looked like it would just absolutely cost him. Other times he'd be making amazing plays and maybe even having a pop-off series where he fried. And it's like, there's been a lot of those, and I think Priesta being one of those is not what this Boston team needs. I said it in one of the earlier episodes of The Flank. Like, I want to see Priesta get back to like when he was frying, like when he was just like that guy who would have the green light, so to speak, and just have takeover games. So I don't know. I think they look better. Like, don't get me wrong, they 3-0'd Toronto. Like, there's nothing negative to take away from that. But for me, it doesn't answer all my questions. I still need to see more from them. And Toronto just looked off today. Like I don't think I've ever seen Envoy have a 0.45 or whatever KD he had. Like, he got world starred. They were even like smirking after losing maps. Like, I don't know what was going on with that Toronto squad. I'm not making the excuses for them. But they did not look like themselves whatsoever. And I think Boston just came out and capitalized. So
they played a 3v4, bro.
Yeah,
Toronto played a 3v4 legitimately. A 0.4 is insane.
So yeah, we'll have to see. I think Toronto will bounce back. I'm not worried about them, but I am curious to see, like, maybe it's at the end of the day, it's a must win for Boston. So maybe this is also kind of an eye opener for them, a confidence booster that gets their engine started a little bit. But I still think they have a lot to work on to get to the level that I think they want to be at.
Yeah, I think it's good that you touched on that. I think coming into this winter break now, I think it's massively important that they've obviously ended off with a win. I think that now we've got a big change coming in within the game. We've touched on it multiple times, but there's a good amount of off time now, a good amount of time to practice and prepare. Teams are obviously still going to be scrimming in between like Christmas and New Year, and those teams will probably be scrimming up till a certain date. So there's still a lot of time to tweak things for a lot of teams, and I think that Boston getting on the board is massive for them. we've really touched on quite a few of their matches, but we didn't really go in depth into them. I think Seattle came in this week 0-2. I think one thing to note from Seattle that I've noticed is from their first two matches, Inder in particular, he came in, he was destroying the first two matches, and without him performing in these last two matches, and he did actually drag them through a win against OpTic in map 3, without him performing, they're looking pretty average. So that's a big concern of mine. There's not really been any pop-off out of the other three players at all. I mean, there's been little moments here and there, but you've not really seen massively strong performances out of the other three in any of the matches. Even though they won the first two, Inder was absolutely destroying in the first two series. So
yeah, he had like 1.8.
Yeah.
The words that you guys are looking for is the word discipline. Discipline is the main criticism that I have of the Seattle roster. Pop off aside, these guys find ways to throw every blender. And like, I'm telling you, this is the game where talent matters the least. You see it in the series results. You see, it doesn't matter how good someone is. Some team can hold and will hold a whole 60 or close to one on some of these teams if they play it correctly. The talent is not the most important factor. And I feel like when Seattle is getting put in these situations, you saw it in the Faze game where they have an opportunity to capitalize on being to a hill first or having a superior position. They find new ways to throw it away. And the person I'm looking for here is Huke. Huke needs to find that sort of level of discipline in his gameplay. It's been a criticism that he's had pretty much damn near his whole career.
I think champs versus MY. Last year,
yeah,
like that one huge play that changed the entire tournament, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And like he needs to find that. I don't know what the coaches are saying. I don't know what his teammates are telling him. I don't know. Like I have a feeling like it's been said many times to him as a player. There's no way it hasn't got through to his head yet. I don't want to just completely put the blame on him. Another player I'm looking at on that team is Arcitys. Arcitys again. He's had one really good series recently. I can't remember who it was, but outside of that this week, he looked pretty poor in both their series. And again, that kind of like, looks like Arcitys when he was on LAG, again, performing really terribly towards towards that team's lifespan. So outside of that, iLLeY, I think iLLeY's been superb. Their S&D looks quite good. And I'm willing to bet it's because they have players like iLLeY on their team who are helping them with strategy and just in general having really good games in Search and Destroy. But if these guys want to compete with the top teams, we saw it when they played against OpTic. We saw it when they played against Atlanta. They got to get their discipline in check and really start to hammer down on some of these leads and situations they get into.
Yeah, I can't see them being that team that's going to be consistently competing against the top teams in Respawn. So I think that the S&D needs to be strong throughout the season for them to be able to like rack up wins.
Yeah, but the big Mark, like right now with the state of the league, I'm not really saying that these teams should be competitive, but I think that what we can hope for as fans and as people that watch or invest in the CDL is to have some of these teams have competitive series with these top four, because in my opinion, at least from a talent perspective, and the top four teams are way ahead. Like the players they have on their rosters, and in terms of how they've been playing the game lately, like they are the best teams. They are going to be very disciplined. They're going to out talent you. They're going to do all these things right, where it's on these lower tier teams to kind of capitalize on their advantages in series. And I'm not talking about, like, at this point, I don't even care. I'm not talking about being competitive, like, consistently. I'm talking about when I watch this team play a top four team, am I going to be excited, man? Because right now, like, I haven't found a team that has, like, me excited when they play against a top four team outside of just waiting for top four teams to play each other. Does that make sense? I could just be waffling, but it makes sense.
I think I get what you're saying. Yeah, like... You're just so excited for the top four to play each other that like these teams that haven't shown you anything yet are just like, get me to the good games.
Good games, bro.
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think Surge is going to struggle with this all year long. For not only the reason that they have an overchild problem, but they just also have a consistency problem. We can't rely on Ender to perform the way he did, especially versus these top teams. And I don't think any of the other guys are doing that either. And then when you compile that with the fact that they throw away almost every scenario they get versus a good team, I just don't have much faith. I have faith that they're going to bully the middle of the pack, probably, but struggle against the top four all year long.
yeah, like coming into this roster, you weren't exactly looking at them and being like, okay, Ender's going to be the guy that pops off and wins them series. I don't think that was the expectation. So, I mean, like you touched on, I think it's hard to judge teams completely within week 2. We still need to see how everyone shapes up against each other, and I think that we're really not going to get that until the first tournament. But I think from what we've seen so far, the rest of the other 3 players really step it up, like I touched on. I think before we get into like the bottom tier teams in the CDL, I want to talk about LAG today, because I think that they obviously came out with a great win. 6-1 in the Battle of LA, which is incredible. And Fame was a player that I think it was you, Pat, in the first week. You were giving him a bit of hate. Maybe both, maybe all was were. But
I was on all of them.
Yeah, I think you were roasting them all. But I think Fame in particular was performing really poorly in the first week of matches. And even in the first match, I don't think he particularly played great. But coming into today's series, he obviously just completely took over. He came in, played well across all 3 maps. All the players, I think, in the squad played well at different moments, but he was consistent throughout the entire series. But yeah, I think they all played great. I think that it was a great team win, but Fame in particular stepped up, which was good to see from him.
Yeah, I think, DiamondCon's been consistent. Like, he was the one guy that we weren't harping on that much in week 1. Like, he's had his moments, and I think he's always been pretty good. I actually teamed with him for a month in Cold War in Challengers, like when I was playing with Lacefield. And he was obviously a really good player and never really got his spot never materialized in the league. But yeah, I mean, the other guys were question marks for me coming into this year as a whole. And we saw them early on. We're like, damn, some of them are kind of getting shit on. But they had a great bounce back in week 2. What I think they really did was solidify themselves ahead of the bottom 4 teams, right? Like, they're for sure not in. There's 4 teams that are worse than them without question, which is good, right? When we had these guys in D tier, right, in the beginning of this year, they basically just are saying no, fuck that. We're at least 2 tiers up from that. They definitely bought themselves some time in my eyes to show more of what they're about. As they play more teams. And I mean, honestly, today they look dominant. Versus the Thieves, they just straight up look dominant. Which regardless is a good win. Anytime you get a dominant 3-0, it's impressive. But Thieves, I think we still understand that Thieves are kind of who knows where they're at skill wise right now. So I still want to see more from the Guerrillas. But I mean, there's nothing to harp on. They look great across the board. Nobody played bad. And the people who were playing bad previously stepped up. So Chris, I know you have more insight on these guys, but yeah, I'm much higher than them this week than I was last.
My thing about the LAG camp is just knowing all of them and their history, and I know people are going to say friendship league, friendship team. At the end of the day, bro, you look at some of these other teams that are underneath them or maybe right around the same level, and I feel like when you look at the rosters, you truly think 8's team. You look at all these teams, 8's team.
Well, you think right? Also AM8's team or Challenger 8's team, right? Not even the Pro 8's team, because most of them are coming from Challengers.
Not them. I'm talking about every other roster. You look at you look at them, it's okay, Pro 8's team. That's literally what I look at. The only teams that I don't look at that in that sense are right now Miami, because it's just, obviously those guys are all Spanish, but I don't look at them as a Pro 8's team. They look like a team, right? And then you look at LAG. That is a team. Those are 4 people that essentially want to play with each other. They would play with each other even if they weren't in the Pro League, right? They are players that want to work with each other, are willing to work with each other, and for a fact they respect each other when it comes to playing the game. While you look at some of these other teams, and yeah, at the end of the day, they're your teammates. But am I fully convinced that some of these players, if they had the choice, wouldn't play with other people? You think some of these rosters
is one of the best examples. I feel that was a coach formed team, not a player formed team.
Exactly. Some of these rosters, I feel this not their first choice. Outside of, obviously, I'm not saying LAG would choose fucking their current roster over players like FaZe, but for the most part, when that middle of the pack, for a fact, these guys are probably would bet on each other more than some of the other teams, and I think is what's gonna separate them, at least for now. I don't think these guys are gonna obviously be a top 4 team or anything, but do I see them being a step above the bottom tier team? Yes. Do I see them potentially cementing their careers as pros? if they continue to perform here, yes, because that is something that I know a player like DiamondCon and even Assault, dude. You played with Assault, right? That guy was a champ MVP back in World War II, but even then, he's always been in that LAG limbo, playing with like Silly and like no offense to you, Pat, but like the tail end of your career, right? So he's kind of like
last time I played with Assault, we won a world championship.
But that's what I'm saying, like towards the tail end of your career, where like you like
I was
even in
having
BO4.
my absolute way.
I'm not shitting on you. I'm saying like obviously like he's been stuck in that same limbo, same circle for so long that like he's never really got to play with fresh faces, or he's never really got to play with like some of the talented players that other players have had in their come ups in their careers.
But I think a problem though, because I think there's more players like that. Like a part of it too is your own responsibility of networking, right? Like. True. I think Adam's problem, like, I mean, I picked Adam up when he was an amateur player, right? We teamed for multiple years, like 3 or 4. Like, I teamed with him a lot. And then after that, like, he kind of went back to that group of friends that was, like, the challengers, no networking to the pro scene. Like, I think he's done himself a disservice by staying in that bubble and not trying to branch out. And it's not just Adam. There's a lot of players that do that, right? Like, stay in that, like, comfort bubble of who they know and don't branch out to be friends with other players and start those conversations. I think even Miracles, right? Going back to BO2, I think Mirror was a player like that. Like, he kind of always stayed in your guys' friend group and never branched out and like networked with other players that could have given him more opportunities. Because again, for a lot of these players, skill most of the time isn't the issue. It's the ability to make teams that you can benefit from. You know, your skill can actually shine. The reality is, and like we're seeing it with Clay, we've seen it with a lot of players, is, you know, no matter how good you are, you're only as good as your teammates and your team can be. And if you're a great player on a shit team, you're going to be a shit player, right? No matter what.
Outside of some insane outliers.
Right, you'll have some series, but like in reality, you're going to be a shit player. You're going to be at the bottom. There's no instance in Call of Duty where one player is going to just take a bad team to the top. And so I think there's a lot of people that are like that like get stuck in those cycles. And you know, there's parts of it's that like the friendship league and it's a little bit more closed circuit, but like I think there's a responsibility on the players to branch out and make opportunities for themselves. Adam's a great shout, but yeah, I mean, talent has never been Adam's issue. And I'm glad he's got a team that, you know, at least he feels comfortable with, and hopefully they can build on.
Yeah, and I also, just to add on to that as well, I think that Adam, I just wanted to mention, when I've worked with different players throughout the year as a coach in the CDL, I even said this to Adam myself, and I've said this to other players. I think Adam is one of my favourite players to work with. I think he's like a good guy that you're able to really easily communicate with. He's going to implement things. He'll tell you if you're saying like some fugays. You know what I mean? He's not going to be like beating around the bush. You're getting the complete honest truth out of him at all times. So I think Adam's a completely great player to work with. And I think for someone like Vios and Diamond Con, etc., who have worked with him previously, I think it's just one of those comfortable things. But at the same time, I do agree with the sentiments you guys had. I don't think they're going to be a team that necessarily is going to come in and win anything. I think they're going to be getting skill gapped in a lot of series this year. I think that they're going to struggle in a lot of series this year. But at the end of the day, I think they've got that team camaraderie and that real belief that they can continue to improve. That can go very quickly, though, if you have some bad losses. I think right now it's early doors in the season, so it's one of those ones that's easy to kind of bounce back, I think. But the losses way down as the season goes on, in my opinion. So
I agree. I think the issue they're going to face is, you know, the advantage they have of being a great team will diminish over time, right? Like we've seen this in every Call of Duty. Like at the end of the year, it always is, you know, obviously you need to be able to be the best team, but like the best players will always learn the best way to play, and the talent will shine at the end of the year. So I think, you know, an early prediction for me is I think they're going to face a tough decision, and I think they honestly, maybe not now, but I think they're going to face having to make a roster change, because Assault and Diamond Con being their best players, I don't think is going to help them long term. I think they need some aggressive, not superstar talent, but like real talent in that sub aggression role. Yes, Fame stepped up today, but on a consistent level, when you compare to what the other teams have, like if they really want to contend for being a top 4 team, getting into championship caliber, and this doesn't just go for LAG, like there's moves that have to be made.
Yeah, 100%.
I think the thing I will say is, like, outside of like the players they have now, these players did come from challengers and they were pretty much at the top of the food chain. And I doubt LAG is really going to be able to go out there and pick up some players from other teams that they might potentially want. So realistically, the people that they're going to be looking for, if they do end up trying to make changes in the future, are going to be from challengers, and they're going to be probably known quantities. Like, for example, like the people that immediately come to mind are people that have already been in the Pro League, Asim, Cramp, right? Maybe Prolu, whatever, TJ. So realistically, when you look at their talent pool, I feel like they probably will realize that if it ever comes down to that point. And unless there's like glaring personality issues or maybe just teamwork aspects that start to falter, I really doubt they're going to like really make changes unless people start getting absolutely world starred. And Fame already did that for a bit, but he obviously had a bounce back. And at the end of the day, outside of Connor and Assault, right? Connor had a little bit of experience in the league. Assault's been there for quite a while. Fame and SJO are pretty young players, and that's kind of the core of their SMGs. So do I think they'll probably end up doing stuff like that in the future? Probably not, but we'll see as
But would you
time
prefer
goes.
someone like Fame who could be a 1.2 one series and a 0.7 the next, or someone that you could just be like, all right, this is my sub, he's going to give me like a consistent 1.0 every game? Like, I think consistency is going to be when they look for talent, they're going to be looking for consistency in that role.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely looking for consistency. But at the end of the day, even if it was 2 matches, it was 1 weekend. Like, I don't really look at it like match to match. I usually look at it weekend to weekend because I feel like it's a little bit more of a sample size. Sometimes your matches are just, you're having a bad stretch of COD. We'll see how Fame continues to develop. I think he was pretty serviceable last year on Minnesota. Do I think he was insane? No, but he was pretty consistent. You knew what he was going to get out of him. And I think this game, at least in that sub role, is going to take a little bit of adapting and we're getting spawn changes. So we'll see. We'll see how he plays out. But yeah, he definitely was the main catalyst as to why they saw so much success today. Because he had an insane series this weekend.
Yeah, 100%. And outside of those teams that we've all been talking about, I think now we're getting into the bottom half of the league now, where it's the teams like Carolina, Vegas, Minnesota. I'm interested to know where I'm interested to know where you guys see each of those 3 teams.
Blow it up, Mark.
I think we all agree that those are the bottom 3 teams, right? You would agree that they're the bottom 3 teams?
Vegas, Minnesota, and what?
Carolina.
Yeah, 100%.
Blow it up.
ROKKR just looked terrible. Like
I would maybe put Thieves there too.
Maybe. At least Thieves kind of looked a little competitive against FaZe, and they've had their inconsistencies. Yeah, they're just an inconsistent roster. I don't know if I'm ready to put Thieves there yet, but listen, Thieves is definitely on fraud watch. Those guys were supposed to be a top 5 to 6 team, and yeah, they haven't really showed it. But outside of that, ROKKR and Ravens look
so
terrible.
ass.
At least Vegas was competitive in their series where they had winnable situations. Obviously, we saw what Nero was capable of. Attach had a couple good maps, but the rest of these teams, I don't even know. Do I have a positive thing to say about any of them? No. Dude,
Ravens shouldn't even have a win, right? They got blessed by Clay's ninja defuse and then that amazing round 11 timing.
Ace.
Yeah. And they beat Vegas. So technically Vegas could be 2-2 right now. So yeah, ROKKR and Carolina are by far and away the worst 2 teams. They're not even on fraud watch, they're frauds, and I think they're in blow it up territory for sure. Because I can look at their roster, I don't even have to watch them play, anymore from what I've already seen. I can look at their roster and know who they need to make changes. Maybe not who they need to pick up, but who needs to go. Yeah, these teams in their current iterations, I don't think are going to find any success. I don't think the patch is going to help them. I don't think spawn updates are going to help them. They're not
delaying the inevitable, bro.
Yeah, they're not good at anything. There's no modes that they stand out in. They're not competitive in anything. Yeah, those 2 teams need to make changes. And I said this on the flank, Mark. I don't know if you were tuning in, but we're going to get to a point where, and Chris chimed in a little bit earlier, there's only so much talent in challengers that is even better, deserving of a spot in the CDL, right? That's better than who's actually in the CDL. And those spots, once teams start making changes, are going to get filled quick, right? And so if I know ROKKR just got the merger with G2. We know G2 as an org, they care about winning, that matters to them. And so, if you want to get ahead of the curve and make a change before it's too late, I absolutely think they should be on the phone during the holiday break. Like, to me, there's no time to waste. Both of them have pretty tough schedules coming up. Like, they could end up going winless the rest of the Major 1 and going into going into Boston with no wins at all in the online portion.
Lamar needs to become a coach, and it's not because like dude, like
we've known that though.
He's so smart. Like, he understands Call of Duty really well, but at the end of the day, like, if he's having trouble transitioning that, and like he's maybe too focused on that, and he can't perform, like it's got to be time at some point. I feel like he would make an amazing coach. Even analyst, whatever the hell he wants to get into. I just think he needs to go. And on top of that, I don't even think the ROKKR situation is necessarily his fault, but I don't think that he's necessarily going to be doing them any favors. I think when it comes to like Vivid and Awakening, I touched on this in the flank, like, if you're going to go from this, like, just stack like individual talent on a roster, you just got to go full throttle on it and then let them figure it out for themselves. Because right now it just seems like they have very many differing play styles. And on top of that, they have a rookie that's not even from the US. So you already know there's like maybe a communication barrier there. Like, they don't really have an advantage on any sort of front. And I kind of feel bad for Linz, because from the eye test, like, the guy actually looks like he's talented. It looks like he understands how to play, and he's a shooter. But they just can't find a win to save their lives.
Dude,
right
I said it, I think, the offseason, like, pairing up Vivid and Awakening was probably the worst pairing with Lamar. Like, that's the last move I would have made. For me, it was one or the other, because like, those guys don't play the way that I think Lamar wants to play COD. They're like, Vivid has one gear. He, like, literally one gear. He's gross, like, don't get me wrong, but he has one gear. He doesn't know when to slow down. He's just pure aggression. He's always gonna have the most engagements in the lobby. He's a known quantity in that sense, and I don't think that's the way Lamar likes to play. When we've talked about Lamar's teams, like the Lamar School of aBeZy or whatever he calls it, like, he likes to have structure on his teams, and I don't think Vivid, Awakening, or those type of players that play with like structure in mind. Linz is a little bit of an unknown quantity for me. I've never really watched him play with a stream on and stuff like that, so I don't know his thought process, but yeah, I don't think this roster made sense to begin with. And yeah, I think I agree with you, Chris. Like, if Vivid and Awakening want to play that way, then yeah, they need to absolutely make some changes.
Yeah, for me, I think
my bad. They need to have a Michael Jordan moment, bro. Like that. I mean, obviously it's not comparable with that statement. If you don't want to play that way, then don't play that way. You remember that from what was that? The last dance? Yeah, that's an amazing moment in that documentary. But yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I think that the biggest thing for me is we're talking about these bottom three teams. We obviously know it's kind of been publicly documented. The finances of the organizations like Carolina, Vegas, they're not really heavily invested into their teams, right? Minnesota are a team, like we've just said, they've merged with G2, a team that's been successful in the majority of esports. I think they're not going to accept, finishing in the bottom four of the CDL. They're going to want to start off strong. And like you guys touched on, I think this team is just weirdly built. It's, there's a mixture of players that just doesn't seem like it fits together. The SMG duo and the AR duo isn't clicking. There's really no positives in any game mode. We've not seen anything. Obviously they're chipping together maps here and there, but they're not strong in those maps. Yeah. They're not looking good at all. So I think for me that they're probably going to be the first team that looks to make a change, because like I said, the finances of these other teams like Carolina, even teams like LAG have probably went down more of a budget route. Vegas, they're not going to be rushing to make changes from like a budget perspective. So I think that Minnesota are going to be the team that has the pick of the litter when it comes to the challengers players. So
yeah,
maybe you wait till the first event. Maybe you just do it straight after Christmas.
A funny story is there was a world where I could have been a Minnesota GM because I had an interview with G2, and let me tell you, I wouldn't have put together that roster. So to my surprise, whenever I saw the roster announcement, I was like,
dude. So I'm looking at their wins. 3 of their wins. I'm gonna read this out. One was a 250-242 hardpoint. One was a 6-5 S&D against OpTic. One was a 3-2 control against Vegas, and the other one was a 250-200 win against Vegas. Like, even in their versus another bottom 4 team, they're playing super close maps just to get wins, and then otherwise they're just edging out a couple like S&Ds or a close hardpoint. Like, they've got nothing going for them as far as any game mode goes. So yeah, I think that they just need to pull the trigger, go ahead and make the change, and move on.
Yeah, and I think one other thing to touch on as well is, like, we're obviously talking about Thieves and their performances as well. And I think if you look at Thieves, they've been getting a lot of like credit for how they've been performing in practice at different moments. Whereas I've not really heard any great things about Minnesota. So like outside of the matches, scrims, everything seems to be going poorly. So, and I do think they're probably going to be the first team to make a change, but more than likely. Carolina, obviously,
blow it up.
Skip,
bro. Like the only player that they have right now that like I would be confident keeping long term is Gwyn. Like
the only reason I don't say Clay is because we know he's getting up there. So
he's also hinted. Yeah, he's already hinted. This is probably his last career year competing.
I don't think Clay is bad. I don't think he's the reason why his team's performing. It's just more so I feel like GodRx and Real just don't have any confidence when they play. I don't know what he even hinted at it in their practice, or he said that this isn't what we're doing in practice, is what he said on Twitter. I think Clay said that. So you got to think that these guys are probably just playing a completely different game in practice, where they're playing with low stakes. They're probably just playing with all the confidence in the world, no pressure. And
I also find it hard to believe they're frying in scrims. Like,
yeah, but I also don't think they're like, I've watched their scrims early on, and granted it was early on, they had competitive moments against good teams. So like, do I think that all of a sudden just changed? No, they probably scrim teams and they're like, all right, we can take some maps. You know, we have some good games against some good teams. But when it comes to the series that they play in matches, they're just getting Kentucky fried. So my thing is just Real and GodRx, they need to start playing with some confidence. They got to start shooting, because right now, Real being a rookie, a lot of people, even I touted him as being a great pickup for this team. He hasn't really showed up. He obviously tweeted, I think, that he's been going through stuff, and I don't even think he's in North Carolina right now. He's in like Toronto right now, so there's probably some like visa fugays happening right now. That's holding him back from, getting to North Carolina. He's probably stressed out of his mind, but GodRx was a person that I was looking forward to watching play in the league. And after that performance today against, who was it that they played? I can't even remember. Oh, OpTic. He just looked terrible. And like, if anything, like that is my fraud watch player of the Ravens right now, because
he can't go from having a 2.0 in Challenger finals last year on land to having a 0.5 now. Like,
yeah, I mean, Ghosty was kind of the same, where he was like going off in Challengers and then went into
he joined
OpTic.
An OpTic team.
Yeah, he joined an OpTic and he kind of fell off on the statistic category, but he was still contributing in wins and coming up big when they needed him to sometimes. But GodRx, he needs to make a statement, because
he joined a team where he should be the star. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, he joined a team that doesn't have stars that allow him to be the star. Like, so yeah.
And the thing is, we know that GodRx likes to play kind of slow. A lot of people kind of like would roast him for it. And it's not like he's getting baited or anything, so he's not allowed to play that sort of play style. If you look at their engagements as a team and the damage dealt and all that stuff, Gwyn's up there every single time. And even Glaciers, he's going out there and he's shooting his gun. So he's definitely in an environment where he should be able to kind of play the play style that he wants, especially with the game that we're playing currently, and he's just not shooting back. So, yeah, just don't really have much positive things to say about the Ravens.
Yeah. Like, we've obviously touched on throughout, but Vegas, I think they're a team that they've probably shown the most promise, I'd say, out of the bottom three teams, although still not great. You have sort of a decent S&D team, like similar to what you've seen from Vegas last year. It seems like it's very similar there. But at the end of the day, I think there's nothing really much to talk about. I think they're going to struggle throughout the season as well. Again, one of those teams that probably needs to make a change sooner than later if they're going to compete, because they need to have, if you're one of these bottom teams, you need to have something that you can hold on to. And I think Vegas last year, they had that hope of champs. And I think that was solely based on their S&D performances. I think they need to get to that point, because they've obviously got some good S&D players in their squad.
I think one thing that this is a different narrative that I kind of want to spin here is, I think the Challenger champs from last year are damn near on fraud watch. A lot of the players from that Challenger champs team found themselves in the league, Gwyn, GodRx, and Purge. And lately, I mean, the only person that's really shown any sort of promise in the league in terms of his individual performances is Gwyn. And even then, when you looked at that Challengers team, if you followed Challengers at all, I don't think anyone had them winning champs. I think the favorites were definitely like Awobabobs, which was like Booza's team, or even I can't remember the teams. I'm trying to remember them. I'm sorry, but I don't think anyone really had them winning it. But they ended up turning up on that weekend and ended up winning the Challengers team. And I think that win at Challengers Champs was what really put a lot of these guys on their radar and almost solidified them getting a spot in the Pro League. So we're going to have to see more out of players like GodRx. We're going to have to see more out of players like Purge if they want to continue to see themselves in this league. Because right now, both of them are kind of just, they're staring down the barrel right now of a smoking gun. Like they're cutting it close for now.
Yeah, I think now is probably the perfect time to actually segue into Challengers. You just mentioned Challengers Champs. We've still not got any Challengers news. There's been a lot of different companies that have been hosting different tournaments. We've now got to the point now where we're 2 weeks into the CDL and we've not heard any news there. Obviously, we have the Boston event coming up where there have been team passes sold and whatnot, but we're still kind of in the dark here, and this is coming from someone who is deeply involved in Challengers, obviously, so it's pretty frustrating for me. I think that I would definitely love to see something from the guys at the CDL ASAP, because it's just a lot of uncertainty, and I think that a lot of sacrifices are made from my perspective, and a lot of these people who are working in Challengers, you have, obviously a much less money is being earned through the league teams is completely different. It's night and day. So when you're sitting there doing full time scrimming 2 days, 6 days a week, when you're putting all that time in and you really don't know what's going on, it's just really frustrating. So
not even a crumb of info.
Yeah,
like all we know is like it's likely to be ran by Faceit, right? And we don't know anything about how many of Challengers Cups, how many elites, how many events. Like there is really nothing. And it's crazy too, because like we probably, obviously holidays are in a week, right? Like, so unless Activision announces something in the next few days, from when this episode airs, we're probably pushing back getting any updates until 2024. And then it's like, you'd have 3 weeks before you go to Boston. So how much can you even fit in, right? Like the players still got to play something to get seeded, right? Like there has to be seeding for that event. And right now there is none at all. Like worst case, they would probably have to rank teams on Modern Warfare 2 pro points, which would throw a pretty crazy curveball at a lot of teams, I think. And yeah, even speaking on, let's say we run one, right? Let's say worst case scenario, they get one event in, one like online cup. Well, then you face the problem with then you only had one cup to do seedings, and like the bracket's going to be screwed. Like after one event, like anything can go wrong. Someone could have a power outage, an upset, and then the bracket at the actual tournament could be screwed. You could have like a pro team being the highest seed. Like there's a lot of factors that can go wrong. And so, yeah, they're running out of time. It's kind of wild to me that, Boston obviously sold all the tickets for the event, but like there hasn't been any confirmation of anything other than there will be an event. So players are like buying into the tickets and getting team passes when they don't even know how they're going to play at the tournament. It's bad. I think it's a bad look overall. We've talked about this a lot before. Like Challengers has to be thought of a lot more than it is in not even just COD, right? Like every esport ecosystem, you have to have a pathway that allows people to get to the pro league. And right now it in my opinion looks as grim as it ever has in 15 years of being around this scene. And it's kind of wild when we think about the fact that this is a $300 million league at the end of the day. And no info at all. Chris, I know you're friends with all the Challenger guys, and like what are their thoughts on this? Like what's their mindset?
I think a lot of them are just depressed right now. Scrims, they still scrim pretty much every day, but like they don't really have anything to look forward to. The grind, like when it comes to like eights and just being active and in that sort of community aspect, is just non-existent right now. And it's because there's just a lot of uncertainty. They don't know what the hell's going on. The only thing that's probably kept the scene active is the fact that there was a big spawn patch recently. So everyone's obviously trying to regrind to make sure that they're on point. They understand the game, but like without any news, getting to the holidays, like what do they even have to look forward to at this point? Like you said, Pat, I think with the break, we're probably, if we do hear news with regards to Challengers, unless they put something out really close to Christmas, we're probably not going to hear anything till maybe the first week of January, and then at that point, The game might even change even further because we're going to be getting another patch, I think, midway through January, right before Boston, with Season 1 Reloaded, new maps, maybe even more spawn adjustments, weapon adjustments. And if we know anything about challengers, is they don't play on CDL clients. They play on the real-time game clients. So if something comes up right before the tournament, they're playing on it at the event. So I mean, I wouldn't expect anything different, where the challengers are going to continue to get shafted and just end up having to deal with the incoming changes.
Yeah, I think it's going to be absolute chaos. Like you said, there's not actually any sort of, no tournaments announced. We could go in, random seeds, a top seeded team loses round 1 of the first cup. There's no other tournament before the event. You get a new patch. There's just so many things that could go wrong right now.
Also, with like the way the points work in the brackets, is like there'll be multiple teams that place the exact same spot and earn the pro points. So you go to the event, you place the same as another team, your seed is essentially random. The teams that tie will be randomized. So listen, I think there's going to be a lot of fugays. I feel bad for them, but at the end of the day, I mean, it is what it is. It's the esports ecosystem that we live in, and it's kind of sad, but it is what it is.
Yeah. I think the update is going to be really interesting now as well. Like, we've obviously had the amateur teams playing it for quite some time, a couple of weeks. The CDL teams, we're going to be seeing them being introduced to it in the next week. And I think these updates are going to consistently evolve the game throughout the season. I'm interested to see now what there's going to be big changes obviously coming in when January comes around. There's the big patch. Do you guys know when the actual like ranked play and all that sort of stuff comes in?
Apparently there was a leak that January 17th we will be having the Season 1 Reloaded or rank play drop. So
did you guys see those skins? Those rank play skins?
Yeah, they're not very good.
Those are rough.
Who designs those? Like, who actually sits and designs those?
I mean,
like,
the art team, monetization teams, like those are the ones who come up with it.
They put no effort in
out.
though. They're just constantly they're putting like the very same skin but just changing slight color variations. Like, look at the grind for camos. You have all these pro players who grind for, you know, all the different camos each year, and some of them look sick, but the CDL iterations of camos are not appealing whatsoever, in my opinion, for fans to
They're just an afterthought. They're an afterthought.
They're completely missing the mark with them. But anyways, that's pretty much most of the topics that we've wanted to talk about. I think we can finally move on to some community questions. Well, not really community questions. Listen, if you guys want to ask us questions in the comments, please type those out, submit them. We'll read over them and we'll pick a couple. Last week, I think a lot of people fell into our bait title with OpTic and stuff like that, and people were just making statements. So we don't really have too many questions that we can touch on. But I mean, there's a couple things that people mentioned in comments.
But it is worth saying, if you post a comment and you're not subscribed, we can't help you. We're scrolling right over it. If you want to get a question or a comment in, make sure you're subscribed. There's a little button right there. Just press it, and then you're good to go for all future episodes. You don't even got to worry about it. And you'll also be able to hit any comment or question that you want, and we'll obviously dive into it.
Yeah. The first comment actually we've got here is from a user called Ujaku. He said, "These guys are a little harsh on the OpTic boys here. It's a brand new team. I'm giving it a major cycle or 2 at least. We've had 2 online matches. That's it. You all need to chill." Lamau.
Listen, I'm gonna be honest. I think OpTic is a great team. I think they're still going to be a top 4 team. My more so thing is their rosters typically have been plagued by inconsistencies that we saw in the first week of matches. We're not going to just like sit there and not call it out if things continue to happen.
And they lost to NY and they look really sloppy. Like, it was a fair criticism.
It's a fair criticism. But that being said, people say that about that team, but like, we criticize every team. You don't make that same excuse when a team you dislike, or a team maybe you're not a fan of, or a team you might think is dog shit. When we say they're dog shit, you don't say, "Oh, it's just the first week, chill." Like, come on, we gotta be honest with ourselves here.
They look terrible today.
Right?
Envoy had a 0.4. Like, he had the world's worst KD in the CDL. Like, we called him out on it. Do we think that's going to continue for that squad? No, probably not. But this weekend, they look terrible. Just like last weekend. I mean, OpTic looked a little bit better than terrible, but they look sloppy against that NY series. So, I mean, Yeah, like we have to call it as we see it. There's no bias in our takes. If someone looks bad, we're gonna say they look bad, and vice versa. If someone looks good, we compliment them. LAG, we just spent 10 minutes complimenting LAG and how big they turned it around. So we give credit where credit's due, and that the inverse of that is also true.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think that at the end of the day, we're just going to call it as we see it. They start off 0-3 on S&D, losing 3-6-5s, although they are close. At the end of the day, they still came out with no wins there, so a big focus of our conversation was just them improving in S&D, and they obviously did put up 2 S&D wins this week, so
if you're
that
a
was a big
championship
focus.
caliber team, you got to close, period. Especially when you're not even playing like the cream of the crop, right?
And not even just close, not look sloppy. Like the rounds that they were losing in those searches were just like throwaways. Like they were doing just dumb shit, like over-challing, looked uncoordinated, strategies round 11 looked terrible. Like it was more than just like one or two things.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. The next comment we've got is from a user called Crimson. He says, hot take, Miami get top 4 at Major 1. What's your thoughts on that?
That is a hot take indeed. The one thing that I will say is if they continue to find success, they're going to have a really good seed, so they might be able to make a run if their first round match is a relatively easy team by their standards. Top 4, that's going to be that would be an insane storyline, and honestly, I don't think it's going to happen. But
the only way
I wish it will.
The only way it happens is if like they get bracket blessed, right? Like if OpTic and FaZe play each other for elimination at top 6 or something. I don't think they'll let me put it this way. I don't think they'll beat any of the top 4 teams, right? They might outplace them if another top 4 team knocks them out, but I don't think they knock out a top 4 team. So I'm going to go with they're going to get 5th to 8th, somewhere in that bubble.
Yeah, I think if you were to judge them right now, if I was to say there was no seeding and all those things involved and they weren't 3-0, but they are. So at the end of the day, I think they can be in a situation where they chip away at another couple wins and they could end up getting one of those blessed brackets. Would I put them in a top 4 team right now? No, but like, could I see them placing top 4? Like, I mean, we see these things happen every year where a team has a really good stage in the online section and it kind of carries into the LAN event where maybe they lose for top 3 and winners, they drop down, they're playing against a kind of easier team for top 4, and then they kind of squeeze in.
Then, the highest I've seen a team like make a run like that, even when they get a blessed bracket that wasn't a established top 4 team, was like top 6. Like every time I think about a Cinderella story, it's like, oh, they got top 6. But
let me bring us down to reality really quick. What's the bottom 3 teams that we just listed? ROKKR, Carolina, and Vegas, right?
Yeah,
those are the bottom 3 that we just said. The worst 3 teams in the league.
Yeah.
Guess who Miami's beaten? Yeah. ROKKR, Vegas, and Carolina.
Yeah.
Like they've looked good. They've been impressive. They've been better than I think most people thought. But they've only beat the 3 worst teams in the league that look horrible. So they haven't even beat a middle of the pack team yet, right? They haven't played them, obviously. You can only play who you get matched up with. But until we see more from them playing these middle of the pack teams and even these top teams, I think throwing out a top 4 placement is kind of crazy.
Nah, I'm buying the ticket. I'm buying the ticket.
Yeah,
I'm jumping on the hot take right now. Nah, I'm jumping on the hot take right now. Miami, top 4, first to bed. Watch it. Just wait and see. 100%, mate. Just wait and see.
I respected I respected Mark staying true to your guns.
Yeah, I'm sticking with it. But yeah, next comment we've got up here, we've got TC River Rat 18. Unbelievable username. Great username, first of all.
You can change your YouTube username. Right?
Yeah, but this is quite a long one, but so tired of this take that leagues are dumb. I like having teams associated with locations. What excites me is when esports use locations as a way of binding people to teams. I feel an affinity to the Dallas Fuel and Dallas Empire, and now OpTic Texas, not because of the players, not because of the owners. I rep my city, that's it.
Here's the thing, though. Franchising brings some good things. For example, the team affinity. It's awesome that teams can get behind their state, where they're from and stuff like that, and rally around that. However, with franchising, it just brings so many other things that are just infinitely worse than having a non-franchise state. And the thing is, you could say, oh, well, why can't teams stay affiliated with their states even if they're not franchised? Well, because they essentially have to get the rights to represent the city and stuff like that from the league. And on top of that, if there's not a franchise league or a closed off league, like, what is the point of these teams even having like a state affiliation? Because if they're not, let's say they fail to qualify for, the major bracket or whatever the hell, like, what are they going to do? What is OpTic going to do as an organization? Pick up another like team to rep Texas, like, just because they didn't qualify? No. So like, naturally, when franchising goes away, those team affiliations, those state affiliations will also go away. And that's way more beneficial. Like the normal Call of Duty ecosystem that we used to have pre-franchising was just so much better for the fans and watching, and even for the competitors, in terms of like getting hype. So, although, listen, I'm a big fan of it too. I love the fact that teams can rally around their states and stuff and cities, but in terms of all the negatives it brings, it's not even close.
I would also say, River Rat, you're also like, I'm not denying what you said is true, and there are people out there that feel the same way you do, but I also think in esports, that's the minority. I think you are the minority, right? Of players who, or fans who feel more affinity toward the teams and not the players. And so I think it goes both ways, but also when we were talking about leagues are dumb, we were mostly referencing the fact that, like, league matches, these formats where you have a league and you have, incremental majors that are defined by league matches and standings where players are playing or teams are playing show matches against each other, those are dumb. Those are not, inducive to esports. No one wants to see show matches, I don't think. I think competition is what's always driven esports since the beginning of time. And competition is meaning tournaments. Like, having tournaments, imagine just taking the exact same thing, and every weekend, instead of watching, 10 league matches that we have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you watch just a tournament. Like, you watched all the 12 teams play in a double elim tournament. They all got to stream their POVs. The league did their POV. That's what we're talking about when we say we hate leagues, because it's a closed system, and there's a ton of format issues that just take away the excitement for fans and for players, right? Like, there's another side of this too, where, and I don't know a player today that said that they would prefer playing weekend, one match a day league matches instead of playing a tournament every weekend, right? Like, every weekend that they're putting on the league. So that's the biggest downside, is just going into these showcase glorified show matches. It's just, that takes the excitement away. You could still have the team affinity and the city-based teams. The format, though, of the league is what is holding us back the most.
Yeah, and I think you have these teams in the league as well that they're going to argue on their back end when they're having discussions with the league that they want equal viewership and stuff like that. And I think that's
which has
like
been the
biggest
problem.
concern.
Yeah. Because we have teams. We have teams who are spending millions of dollars in salaries, and then we have teams who are putting up the absolute minimum. And so it's like, if everyone's getting broadcast rights, these teams aren't competitive.
Yep.
Like, traditional sports have drafts, so at least, like, young superstar talent that's coming into the league is automatically going to these bottom teams. We don't have that. We're just repeating the same bottom 4, bottom 5 teams every year, not being competitive, not being exciting to watch. And so you get matches where it's just absolute snoozes, because the org who's got into this $3 million league doesn't care to be competitive. And that's not good for anybody. So we have a half franchise model when you compare it to sports leagues, and we have all the worst parts of it. And I think that's the problem, and why we should absolutely shift away from this model.
Yeah, I've got to agree with you there. I think that the original idea of the CDL to what we've actually currently got is so far apart, and I think that's the biggest issue here. We were supposed to be traveling around the world every week, but I don't know if you remember those original schedules, Pat, but
those are insane.
It was absolutely mental. Obviously, I'm glad we're not doing that, but at the end of the day, I think there's definitely a lot of improvements there to be made. Hopefully things do change, but I'm not too optimistic about it. The final comment we have here is from someone called JokerB188, and he says, "Didn't realise Mark's accent was that strong. True Scottish geezer." I think the funniest moment from last week for me was when I was trying to say iLLeY, but you guys thought I was saying it, or I think Chris thought I was saying iLLeY. But I think for the most part, obviously, I've spoke to you guys for years, so I'd like to hope you understand what I'm saying.
I can pick it out. Yeah,
I do. There's just that. I mean, it was a gamer tag. It's not like you're saying an actual word. It's a gamer tag. So I was like, what?
I'm going to call him Ender from now on. He's Ender from now on. That's
There you
easier to
go.
understand.
What was the
I like
first
that.
year I met you, Mark? Did you go to the 2011 MLG events?
No, but I think we used to
it's
potentially
2012.
play each other like online back in like World of War.
Yeah,
I think
we
your
definitely
name used to be like Headaches back in the day, right?
Yeah. But the first time I met you would have probably been EGL, right? In
Yeah.
Manchester. Yeah, 2012.
Yeah,
That
it was a while.
14 years ago almost. That's fucking insane.
Yeah, we've been doing it for a bit, haven't we?
Or, no, 2012. 12 years ago. I'm insane. 12 years ago. Math is
Yeah,
hard.
math's not great.
Yeah, I don't know why I said 14.
Yeah, but I mean, just to think, looking back at those days, the amount of players that have come and gone since those times in the
it's
scene and stuff like that,
insane.
it's absolutely mental. We've went through like, although it's only 12 years, it's felt like we've went through several different
generations
of COD players. But we're
Yeah.
still here. We're
Yeah.
still fighting.
And there's only a few of us that are still around that were around from back then. I think 3 of us are on this call, and there's probably maybe 10 other ones that I can think of that have been around that long. Maybe that might be too many. So it's been a long ride for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And just to end off the show, I just want to say to you guys again, and Chris touched on it, but make sure you guys are dropping your comments below. Make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel, and hopefully you guys have a great rest of your evening. See y'all later.
Happy holidays, happy New Year. We'll see you in 2024.
That's a great
Yep.
part. I forgot to say happy holidays. That's absolutely outrageous out of me. Everyone enjoy their Christmas and New Year. See you guys later. Peace out.